Welcome to Brothers in Media with the bros who know, Scott and Craig Colby. Misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, they are everywhere. Everywhere. How do we know what's real anymore? Today, the Brothers in Media are going to tackle that topic with a special guest. But first, let me talk about my brother. Scott Colby is a journalist with 36 years of experience as a reporter, columnist, editor, photographer, and designer, as well as a national best-selling author and the creator of the Coach Colby Writing Academy. Visit his free website, coachcolby.me, for a free insider's cheat sheet on how to write effective op-eds.
And he's Craig Colby, or is he? Craig has spent 37 years in broadcasting. He's an award-winning producer and author and owner of Colby Vision, a video production and consulting company. Today, we are joined by Molly Thomas, winner of the Michener Deacon Fellowship for Investigative Reporting. She's worked at W5 at CTV, and she is currently the host of Big If True on TVO, and she appears real to us on our podcast.
Yay, nice to be here, guys.
Thank you for joining us, Molly. Strap in. We're going to cover a lot of topics, but first we've got to ask for anybody who hasn't seen your excellent show, and I tape it every week. Big If True. Why does this show, what is it and why does it need to exist?
You know, it needs to exist because we don't know what's up or what's down anymore. To be honest, if you look on any of your social media feeds, I bet you're confused, or you're at least looking at images twice or wondering if the video was manufactured. We're living in the world of generative AI, and things are moving so fast. And, you know, even in my career in the last 15 years, my social feeds have turned from like, oh, this is a great connection point, to I have no idea who put this out, who's behind this, is someone funding this? Like, there's so many questions. And so I think as more and more people are online for their information, this is the challenge that we have before us. I was just reading a stat the other day that by 2030, 90% of content that we are going to consume is going to be synthetic. 90%. Now that might be a worst case scenario, but like, just think about that. And that is in the next few years, like right ahead of us. So this is a serious conversation we need to be having.
Synthetic's a word I'm not familiar with. What does that mean?
Synthetic. I mean, AI manufactured, like usually generative AI is what we cover a lot on our show, and just the technological advances of what people can be seeing, Scott. So, for example, romance scans is something that we covered this year, and we're watching video where someone's holding their iPhone up. There's a secondary iPhone here, and you guys might be talking to me, but you might be seeing a man from a different country. And the way that synthetic video is able to dupe people into falling in love, and then oftentimes falling in love, maybe investing in something, or giving some money to their loved ones. Like, and when you watch those videos, they are so real, they are so scary real, that anyone could be duped. Like, any of us, even though all of us have worked in media our whole career, any of us could be duped.
I have an example of that from this week. I was on a shoot with one of my favorite cameramen, and he said, "Did you see the video conference with Austin Matthews after he lost in the playoffs against the Panthers?" I said, "No, what did he say?" And he started saying things that clearly Austin Matthews would never say. And I looked it up, and our brother sent us the same thing.
Right.
So, our brother, who is not on this show, is a bright guy.
He's not invited.
He's not invited to this party.
He's got to give us something.
Real either.
But he was fooled by it, and so was a cameraman, a guy who's been at those conferences. And once you hear what's coming out of his mouth, I realized it couldn't be true. And I saw another one with the president of South Africa apparently running down Trump. And it sounded like he wouldn't say that because he wouldn't want to be off sides with Trump. And when you watched his lips move, they were out of sync.
Right.
But you've really got to be on guard for this stuff.
I mean, Craig, that's because you knew Austin Matthews, and you know a little bit about him. You knew a little bit about the president of South Africa, that he was meeting with Trump, and that, there would be deepfakes that would emerge. But what about the people that aren't following the news on the norm? What about the people that aren't keeping up to date, and all they see is a hockey player at a press conference, and then think, wow, that's wild. I can't believe he said that. Share. I mean, that's the problem. It's happening everywhere.
How big is this problem?
Well, I think the 90% gives you an idea of what we're going towards. But I mean, in terms of in Canada, like just a few years ago, there was about 43% of Canadians said they don't know what's true and what's fake. And that was a few years ago. That's before we're talking about really like the newest stuff around generative AI. And I think that number is actually low as we talk to so many different people on our shows and different demographics too. We've learned, you know, a lot of my parents will send me a lot of things that I'm like, where did you get this from? What link is this? Like, you know, and it's easy to say, oh, it's my parents' generation. No, it's actually younger kids are also being fooled. So one of the things about kids that have grown up in the internet age is that they're so familiar with the internet and they're so familiar with their phones is that anything that is made to look like credible script, credible headlines, credible videos is attractive to them. So we had experts telling us, you know, even the youngest generation is getting fooled by this. And then you have teenagers who have grown up in a generation where they haven't interacted with a lot of mainstream news. I talked to a girl the other day that told me, I only get my news from TikTok. And I said, well, how do you know that news is true? Like, how do you fact check that? Like, do you check the New York Times? She didn't know what the New York Times was.
Oh, no.
Didn't know what it was. And so I had to actually show her and we were talking it through. She's like, no, I don't follow any other sources. So if all your news is coming from TikTok, for example, we know that that's a place that has had all kinds of narratives and collaboration sponsorships with not necessarily accountability. We also know UNESCO did a big study globally that showed that 2/3 of news influencers, you know, great charismatic personalities that are on your TikTok are not fact checking. And most of the verifying of claims that they do is actually just by likes or comments. That's how they do it. So we know there's a problem online, and yet we have a whole generation that's only consuming through TikTok.
Now, when you mention to this young person and you ask her, how are you verifying? Does she understand the problem?
So
right? That's my concern is that
sure.
people like myself, you know, dinosaurs, look at all this gray. I understand the problem. You know, I work in mainstream media. I want people to come to mainstream media because we fact check and we hold ourselves responsible and we correct our mistakes and etc. These young people, do they understand why this is a problem?
Well, I don't think that young girl did, but I asked her because she was also in university. I said, how do you fact check your papers? And she said, well, I'll look for like research studies. But even in our show, we've learned a lot about predatory journals where even there can be bad information in research journals or bad information that flows down in the health system because of these predatory journals that are literally paying people for their work or you know, having AI print their work. So it's just like it's become so confusing that even if you have good intentions behind it, you can get fooled. And I think there are some young people. I mean, we had Samir on our show, who's like a teen fact checker with Media Smarts, which is a great organization that's trying to build media literacy. And, you know, he's like, it's a big problem. And I didn't even realize how big it was until I started to do this work. And it's like unveiling new things for me. So there is hope that there's young people that are, you know, being trained up, but like the scale of the training for everybody, we're not there yet. I mean, we all need media literacy. And the fact is, even if you have, you know, tools or classes, the technology is moving so fast. How do you keep up with all of the changes? It's a huge challenge.
I worked in science media journalist for about a decade. And I was surprised in your story about the kind of the fake bought in scientific journals.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
That surprised me in your show. What's the most surprising story that you've discovered?
You know, I just find things that I may not like necessarily. Like I follow a lot of news, so any kind of politics stuff I'm on top of. I love sports, so you know I'm always having an ear to that. But we did a show on UFOs, and that's not what I follow every day. But it's so fascinating because UFOs have been in the news the last few years, and there's been a lot of Congress meetings around it and a lot of, you know, possible sightings and people coming forward. There's a big documentary, I think, coming out soon with all these, you know, insiders in the government to share what they know. So it is a topic that people have loved and been obsessed with. Now, whether you believe in aliens or not, that's up to you. I don't think that's the issue. I think what we found so interesting is that this belief in aliens, people have used that belief to scam people throughout the last 100 years. And so in our show, we were able to peel back some of those layers and then talk about what kind of scams are happening today to people that believe in aliens. So have you guys ever heard of med beds?
I heard you talk about it in the pre-interview, but go ahead.
Okay, you have a little bit of a heads up, but med beds are essentially this alien technology that apparently, you lie down in it and it will, cure leukemia, cancer, any ailment in your body. And it's being sold to people. It doesn't exist, okay? It doesn't exist. It's
Snake
being
oil
sold
salesman.
100%. And that's happening today. There are people in Canada selling this dream. And you know what? When people are desperate and if, they have family members that are suffering, if the healthcare system can't help them, I get it. Like, of course you would do anything for your loved one. So like you see how people take advantage of that desperation. So that was so interesting to me because yes, we talk about aliens and yes, they're kind of in the news cycle, but here we have like an actual scam that is ripping people off of like life savings. And we need to be talking about these things so people at least are aware to be like, oh, I've heard about this before. Like I need to start talking to my friends about this. I need to ask more people before I invest in something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was at a conference, an international conference with some of my colleagues, two of whom I really respect them. One had done a UFO show and another had worked on some. And the UFO show that my friend had worked on was going to the original papers and stuff like that. And the other person he was talking to said, the thing with these shows is you can't say that anything is fake or the believers won't watch it. And like this is for legitimate documentaries for legitimate organizations, which is one of my beefs with sort of my part of the media is like TikTok, everyone's fighting for the eyeballs and people are willing to, I don't think either of these people lied or they would, but there certainly was a way the show was presented so that people would watch it and in a way that encouraged belief rather than just laid out the facts.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not here to judge people on what they believe. We all believe different things and we may not agree on it. That's okay. That's what we have in a free country. But I do want to warn people about the scams that are taking advantage of whatever they believe, whatever that is. And this happened to be aliens. And I just learned a lot. So that's just a cool episode. And we have two kind of nerdy professors who would just love aliens and everything alien. So they're great guys to talk to.
So in your show and in your research, is there a path forward, say for government or whatever, to regulate it in a way that people can have recourse? Right?
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's honestly really difficult. But a lot of experts that come on our show talk a lot about regulation around social media platforms. Because there's one problem of disinformation, which is intentional, sinister information being put out, whether that's governments or political parties or, whoever wants to just create chaos. And then there's misinformation, which is you and I just, posting, resharing, retweeting.
The Austin Matthews video, which is
exactly
essentially harmless.
Totally. And it's, so there's both of those things are going on at the same time. But I think what's interesting that we've learned a lot on our show is just how the algorithms work. And, rage baiting is great for social media platforms. Misinformation is great for social media platforms. That Austin Matthews video, I bet you went crazy. I saw it too. It came up and I was like, this can't be real. It sells. And so there's no profit incentive for social media companies to pull back, right? And we've seen that change. I mean, Elon Musk came in with X and he's, taking away fact checking, like let's just do community notes. Facebook's done the same thing. It's scaled back, right? So you're seeing these big companies because they know it makes the money. Like that's the bottom line. So I guess in response to that, if there's no regulation, and I think if they're going to try to do any kind of regulation, you got to do it on a global scale, right? Because Canada even tried to do some regulation even for C18, right? Hey, like let's get some more money into the legitimate news organizations so that they can, share their videos, their news on social media. Well, Meta said, nah, not interested. You guys are too small of a player. I'll just block all of your news. We just went through an election cycle, like the most important election cycle for us as Canadians to understand what's going on. And when we know that more and more Canadians are getting their information from Facebook and Instagram, well, there's no legitimate news on there. So something is filling the gap. and people need to know what's filling the gap and who is like doing that in a sinister way.
What about
So
media
it's a big
training
problem.
with and making it mandatory in schools, for instance?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is huge. I think the next generation is the hope, because they're also the most savvy online. And so getting people involved and young people involved in the conversation where they're speaking to their peers about, some of the pitfalls, the things that they see online, what to watch out for, I think is critical. Our whole show is aimed towards, 20 to 40-year-olds with that in mind. But there's an even younger group, like Scott, I think it needs to be like, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds that are leading this conversation, because otherwise, like, they only know the internet. They only know their phones. I can't even imagine. Like, we're kind of sitting in between the worlds, where we knew the world before this all happened, and we're also trying to adapt. Like, there are kids growing up completely in this, and if we don't get the media literacy right, we're going to be in big trouble.
So what can the media do? I mean, you both work at prominent media organizations here in Ontario and in Canada. I think the media gets beaten up all the time. They're way too easy for people to say, oh, the mainstream media lies. Scott and I talked about that. Your news organizations don't lie. There's a huge punishment for lying. But we also know how mistakes happen. We've seen the sausages get made. And I find media professionals a little apologetic about the media. What can we do as media sources and the media sources you work for to defend ourselves? Because as we talked in the pre-interview, Molly, media organizations spend a lot of money fact-checking and getting it right. What can we do to convince people of the worth of mainstream media?
Oh man, I think consistency and transparency. I think the next generation wants a radical transparency that generally, I will say, in news organizations, yes, we'll put out, good factual or information, but there's not always the transparency behind. I feel like young people want to know more. They want to know more about the person giving them their information. And you can see that because of the rise in the influencers. Like, they care. They want to know if you're partisan. They want to know if you, like, they want to know those things. And I'm not saying that newscasters have to necessarily like put our line in the sand, but they want to know more than what we're offering. And so sometimes the veneer of just a TV studio is not working. And so you have to pull back the curtain a little bit. You got to let people into your homes. You got to like let them see the rest of your life. And I think that for that generation who's used to that is the only way. And so you've seen, all of us have adapted, right? Like, I have on my show, there's a whole segment called Reality Check. We film it for socials. It is really for socials, and it goes on TV. Anyone that loves TV watching our show is probably like, oh, why does it look like that? It's like a vertical video in the middle of this big screen. Because we're making it for the next generation. That's how they consume and that's how they speak. So I think it's less of, I don't want to defend. I love what I've done. I believe in journalism. We work really hard to fact check, and it takes so much time to be able to do what we do as a team. However, as media, we also have to adapt, and we have to see what people want, and we have to figure out like where we can journalistically go with them, because it's a different time. It's a different time. We can't just stand and say, well, we've always done it this way. You should only listen to us. It's like, you're telling us something too that we need to adapt and change. And so what is the balance? What's the compromise in there that we can make and still be journalists and still be true to the facts and how we were trained?
Any thoughts on that topic, Scott?
Well, I think that we need to, as mainstream media, we need to meet the young people where they are, right? I think everything that Molly said is accurate. But we need to be, I guess, on TikTok, right? We need to be there with our own videos saying, hey, this is the news, right? And I think we need to play a role in educating the public on the need for accurate news and responsible journalism, and why you need to trust people like TVO, the Star of the Globe, CTV, CBC, the mainstream ones. And I don't want to pick on the other ones. There are a lot of emerging media like The Logic and Trillium and things like that. And they do great work as well. So yeah, that's what I think, that we all have a role to play. Like, everyone has a role to play. Media, schools, governments, to let people know that there is legitimate media out there, and they are responsible. And this is why it's dangerous when we have this fake news. And also, like we've seen, it is amazingly well done. The fake stuff is so hard to tell. It's almost impossible to tell. You need your spidey senses tingling the entire time to say, this doesn't ring true. Does this ring true? You know? And like in our job, we get people submitting stuff to us. Like I'm an opinion editor. I get people sending stuff. I can't fact check every single thing, right? But I know, I look into the people who submit a little bit, and also you have to rely on your judgment to say this just doesn't feel right, you know. And I've uncovered some things that I wasn't happy with when I took the time to research something and say, yeah, this doesn't pass the smell test. Yeah.
You can take the time. You got to take the time. And what I found is that a lot of people don't have the time. And so what our shows, and I think what you guys are trying to do too, is try to help fill that gap a little bit, because maybe people have time to pop in, audio to listen on a podcast, or, watch a YouTube video when they're home at night, but they don't have the time to do the deep dives that we're doing as a team, or the fact checking that we're doing around that video that popped up. And so hopefully we can be a tool for people to say, oh, let me look up this topic. Did, Big If True cover it? And, they get a little bit of insight. So that's our hope. I mean, I think we're all fighting the same fight.
Yeah. There was a classic example this week where the two newspapers in the States ran a advertorial piece in their product. It was printed by it was produced by a syndicate, King Syndicate, and it was top summer reads, right? Did you see about this story this week?
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I saw maybe a headline.
Yeah, a freelancer in Chicago produced a top summer reads story and sent it into the syndicate, and they published it. And it went in the Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Well, of the 15 top books, 10 of them didn't exist. The books did not exist.
It's crazy.
He asked AI, has what they call hallucinations, and 10 of those books just don't exist, and they got published, right? And no one fact checked it, and it's a harmless piece in the sense that like no one lost any money, no one was scammed, but it really erodes the credibility of the media, and it shows why it's so important that you have to trust your writers. You got to trust your sources, and it just shows how AI can lead you astray if we don't keep the guardrails in place.
We just covered a story like that, Scott, for our Fact Check Friday, and it was similar in the vein that there's a bunch of political books about our political leaders in Canada on Amazon, and they are written most likely by AI. And if you actually look, you can't really figure out the author. It's like the grammar's off if you actually get into them. Like there's a lot of sketchy things. And, there's people that actually, write those kinds of researched books, like the amount of time it takes to put it out there. But, we just had an election. So many people are looking to know, who the leaders are, who the leaders' wives are, whatever. And so this is a perfect way to scam people. And it's like, well, where are they pulling information from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we teach AI. AI can only do what we teach it. You can teach it good things. You can teach it bad things. So those books can be full of just great things and junk. Mm-hmm. So people have to be really cautious, especially the books. It was really surprising to me too on the same type of topic.
Yeah, I think that should be another topic that Craig and I can delve into one week, because we both are self-publishing books, and we do it through Amazon. But they now have limitations on, you can only upload 100 books a day. Like some ridiculous amount of books people can self-publish using AI, right? Wow. And there's no fact check there. There's no quality control. Yeah.
So Molly, you've been living in this misinformation, disinformation, deep fake world for a season of your show. How can people tell what's real and what's fake?
Honestly, we're going to need each other. We're going to need each other because it's not so simple. It's not so simple. We just did an episode on war and disinformation, focusing in a little bit more on the India-Pakistan. Now there's a ceasefire in place, but that's everyone's on edge on that side of the world with the recent attacks. And It is so difficult. I mean, I was watching video games from Arma 3 that are being used as, you see them and people will claim that they're part of, an Indian attack or a Pakistani attack. And they look, I mean, I'm not a huge video game player, so maybe video game players that know those games would be like, this is fake. But for the average person that just sees this come across their feed, it's scary. It looks really real. And this is a tactic that's been used, especially over the last decade. We're seeing, old photos, old videos, and, reverse images searches help, those types of things that we can use our own tools to figure it out. But not everyone knows how to do those things. And it takes time. Mm-hmm. It takes time. So I do think it's educating yourself to understand what to watch for. Like even in a deepfake video, for example, some of these generative AI, if sometimes even when you move your hand, like you can see like a little bit of a wash on the hand, that's sometimes a signal, like even just a little glitch that like something might be off. So people need to watch for that. But I think a lot of this is knowing these kinds of topics and it's almost like that red alert for your mind to be like, where else can I look at this? Where else can I fact check this? Who else is talking about this? And if it's only that one source, I think you should be like super, super, super skeptical.
And what do you want people to know?
I want people to know that you're not on this alone. It can feel overwhelming. It is an overwhelming time. But I think in that we need to really keep talking to each other. I think online we can become very, very siloed, especially with this kind of misinformation, which is really just pulling us apart. And I think the more we can take that video and go chat with your neighbor across the fence and say, hey, did you see this? Know anything about this? And start having those conversations, because again, with the rise of this synthetic content, how are we going to beat it? Like it has to be human beings collectively working together to figure out ways to do it. And that's just on a small scale, but on a global scale, we have to be thinking about that too. Like, how can we, utilize even the power of AI the opposite way? Like, I know there are banks in this country that are utilizing AI to detect financial schemes. So it's working in the opposite way too. But for the average person out there, it is so overwhelming on a personal level that I think before we click share, before we're just like, whoa, because I know we're all trying to almost be journalists. We want to break the news. We want to break that video. We want everyone to see it first. Let's just calm down. If it enrages you, if it makes you super emotional, it's actually a trigger to you that you should stop and not share. It's very hard to do because we all want the likes and we all want the clicks, but it's actually creating so much chaos in society when we do.
Yeah, use the fact
Nike ad. Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. 100%. Just don't do it. At least talk about it first, know? And I think this is also a great opportunity for, generational talking. I think, I hear my friends that are older will say, oh, well, kids are always on their phone. And, kids are on the phone will be like, well, they don't understand me. Well, this is a great opportunity to bridge the gap, because guess what? There's a whole generation that knows everything technology that exists. And you have, a generation that's learning, and there's a generation in between. And so what an opportunity to start to look at these things, have conversations, and ask each other for the expertise that exists on both ends. You have people that know traditional media, that know mainstream, that know, let's look at these sources. And you have kids that are so well versed that they can find you that video in 5 different places in 10 seconds. So let's utilize that. But that means we got to talk to each other. And I think we sometimes get away from that. And I think that's a big loss.
Scott and I grew up in a house. Our father is a scientist. Our mother was a teacher and a writer. And our dinner tables at night were debate stages. Bring your opinion and be ready to defend it. And we had big, huge, sprawling discussions. Occasionally they get heated, but I think for the 5 of us, those were really special times to have those discussions with the family.
For sure. And, we had Carol Loff on our program, longtime journalist, who's worked all over the world. And she comes, she was telling me about her family, and she writes it in her book about, the differences, the vast differences amongst the people at her family table and her background and her, religious, and there's just so many different pieces. And she's like, we always get into it at the table. She's like, we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is a good thing. She's like, somehow we've gotten away from that. You know, we see things, we get enraged, and we're either going to yell at each other or we're not going to talk to each other. Both of those don't work, you know? And so yeah, we gotta go back to the basics. Go back to the kitchen table that you guys grew up around.
And we got to listen.
Totally.
That's my big thing. That's my big mantra these days. Like, you know, when you really win in a conversation or an argument, you win when you come away with new insight. And you're not going to do that talking.
Great point. So important. I was listening to you closely, Craig.
Scott, anything else you want to cover?
Well, I think we covered all the salient points. We could go on and on, but we can't.
Well, we could. Molly, where can people all over the world see Big If True?
Yes. So if you're in Ontario and you still have a TV in your house, Sunday nights at 8 p.m. We air, so you could do that. But of course, we're living in the online world. So most people are going to find us on YouTube, where we release segments throughout the week. So that's at Big If True TBO. And if you want to watch the show in like a full version, you can still look up Big If True TBO just online, and you'll get our website, which you can watch it just like you're watching it on TV. Instagram, TikTok, find us, Big If True, Molly Thomas TV, and there's lots of good stuff. Hopefully we can help a little bit.
There is. It's in my PVR. And Scott, where can people get your excellent book that I see over in the right-hand corner of
over there? Yes,
right there. Where can people get That's What You Think?
That's What You Think. You can get it at Amazon, any Amazon site in the world. That's the best place to get it. And there's more information on my website, coachcolby.me.
And you can get my award-winning book, all caps, Stories That Justify an Outrageous Hat Collection, online. Best to get it from me because our mother told me I would sell more books than I actually did, and I have a lot left. My mom was doing her job. And my next book, The Unqualified Hockey Coach, is going to be out August 15th on Amazon. So we all get to plug something at the end. At the end, where it should be. Hopefully people have listened to us enough and liked us enough that they want to consume what we're putting out there. Molly, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know your show is wrapped for the year, right?
We're just wrapping. We have one more show left. So yes, just finishing it up. But reruns are on. And of course, YouTube, you can always find us.
Well, enjoy your summer, and thank you for doing such good work. You're an excellent journalist. I love watching the show, and we appreciate that you're out there fighting the good fight on behalf of all of us who can be easily fooled when you're in the media or not.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks, guys.
All the best.
Thank you.